Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Louise Minchin and Dan Walker.
So it was the announcement that the world has been waiting for a highly effective coronavirus vaccine which could be in use by the end of the year.
It's not licensed yet. The two pharmaceutical firms behind the vaccine have several hurdles still to clear, but scientists around the world have already hailed the milestone achievement.
Well, let's get some more details from one of our regular guests here on BBC Breakfast, Professor Tom Solomon, who's an infectious disease expert from the University of Liverpool. Good morning. So how good is this news?
This is great news. It's better than we really could have hoped for. This is a vaccine available before Christmas, which is protecting more than 90% of people who receive it. Now, if you compare this with flu, where we accept a vaccine that protects 50% of people, and you consider that for COVID vaccines, we were considering allowing even less protection, the fact that it will protect 9 out of 10 people who receive it, it looks like, then it's fantastic news. It couldn't be better.
The Prime Minister talked about other hurdles ahead. So what are the main issues?
Well, they haven't yet published the paper, so it needs to undergo peer review. And in particular, we will want to see which groups of recipients are protected. And then also there are the safety data that need to be looked at, although my understanding is that there have been no indications about any worries on the safety. And then they'll have to get approval, which will take 2 or 3 weeks, regulatory approval, and then they'll go to license. And
how quickly can that all happen? People were saying by Christmas.
Yeah, well, I think 2 or 3 weeks to get regulatory approval. What's very different this time compared to anything in the past is that normally we wait until we know a vaccine works before we manufacture it in large scale. But for COVID, people have been manufacturing the vaccines in large scale even before they knew they worked. And the British government have funded this along with many others, so that the moment we knew a vaccine did work, it would be available. And so there are doses available. I think there are 50 million doses available now. I hear that maybe between 5 and 10 million of them may come to the UK. So that should mean if all goes according to plan, we should start vaccinating before Christmas. But I think, as the Prime Minister said, we don't want people to stop thinking about isolating and separation, social distancing, because clearly that's going to be the mainstay of protection through the winter. We're not going to be able to vaccinate everybody by Christmas, and it's going to carry on over the months ahead.
And Tom, as far as we know, you have to have 2 vaccinations. At what point might you be protected if it works as we hope?
Well, yeah, this vaccine was tested with 2 shots about 3 weeks apart. So there's probably some protection after the first shot. There usually is with a vaccine. But you need the second shot to get up to 90% protection. And then you'd be protected within a few weeks.
Right. And just tell us about actually the sort of physicality of getting this vaccine, rolling it out on the scale that it needs to be.
Yeah, so although we're very excited and it is fantastic news, it's not the complete answer. There are going to be logistic challenges with this vaccine. It has to be stored at minus 80 degrees, whereas most vaccines are stored either in a normal freezer or even a fridge. So what that means is there's going to be a lot of thinking about how best to give this. But also, the other reason why it's such good news is because it's shown that we can vaccinate against this disease. And there are about 40 other vaccines in clinical trials. About 12 of them are in these late phase 3 trials. Most of them are targeting the same bit of the virus. So the hope is that many of these other vaccines will come through in the next few weeks, and that will really boost our ability to vaccinate whole populations. And
lots of people at home will want to know, when do you talk about, masks and social distancing, when do you think, given that there is this vaccine, there are others on their way, we might get back to some sense of what was our normality?
I think we will be returning to normal, but I think even when we have vaccines, even by the middle of next year when large numbers have been vaccinated, I think we're not going to forget about COVID. I think people will still want to use other measures. In Asia, where I've worked for years, after the initial SARS virus about 20 years ago, people have always worn masks after that if they have a cough or a cold to protect others. So I think things will return to a new normal, but we won't have a complete, the clock's not going to go back. I think things are going to be different going forwards.
And how many people need to be vaccinated for it to help other people, for example?
Well, this is a critical question. We think for the term is herd immunity, and people have to develop herd immunity from either being vaccinated or from being exposed to the virus. and we think it's something like 80% needed. But it's likely that the vaccine will be targeted on those who are elderly or those who are vulnerable through other reasons. And it's not yet clear that we will actually want to vaccinate, for example, all the school children, all the teenagers. I think a lot of these things have to be worked out depending on the nature of the vaccines that come through. But it may be that actually in the year ahead, we say we're going to target the vaccine on those that need it for their own personal protection. You can imagine in schools, if all the teachers have been vaccinated and if the whole elderly population around have been vaccinated, we may not need to vaccinate children in the same way because very few of them get sick.
Well, how lovely to speak to you on a day when there's good news. Tom Solomon, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I know lots of you are talking about that this morning, and so are we. And we've got lots of experts lined up for you today to give us a bit more information about all of that. And we'll be speaking to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, in about 45 minutes.
Let's catch up on the weather. And look at this, Carol. Misty out there, morning.